So ladies and gentlemen, dear lovely people, the next topic is going to be really interesting and effective too. So this is going to be central to effective marketing in today's hyper-segmented and ever-evolving world. So as we all know, the significance of culture, the importance of language, the power of tradition, right? But do we all know how to utilize that in marketing? We don't, right? So yes, this session is going to be really helpful for that. The topic is going to be the power of culture, how to utilize the power of language, culture, and tradition in marketing. So ladies and gentlemen, in an era where brands compete not just for market share, but also for the hearts and minds of consumers, understanding and leveraging cultural significance have become a cornerstone of successful marketing strategies. It is about forging genuine connections and resonating deeply with audiences through authenticity, relevance, and respect. So yes, in this session, we are going to have a mentor and 3 panelists. So ladies and gentlemen, with utmost pleasure, I am about to invite our session's chairperson. So yes, join me in welcoming our session chair, Mr. Vivekanand Pani, co-founder of Reverie Language Technologies. Give it up, please. Put your hands together in welcoming the gentleman on stage. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. So now, I am about to welcome all our esteemed panelists. So ladies and gentlemen, we are going to welcome VP and Head of Insights and Analytics of ITC. Give it up for Mr. Vara Prasad. Welcome, sir. So yes, a gracious welcome to the Chief Business Officer of Butterfly, a Crompton subsidiary. Give it up for Swetha Sagar. So yes, this is going to be a rich and engaging discussion highlighting the significance of language and culture in marketing. So we do have one more panelist joining us. So please put your hands together in welcoming the partner and head of Chennai operations of RK Swamy. Give it up for Shuvadeep Nag. Welcome. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Here we have a great panel today and a very interesting topic, language and the power of language and culture. We know that when we speak to someone in their language, it's a lot easier for them to accept. But language is also a representation of culture. For any message that has to get across, I think the connect with language and culture makes it a lot simpler for people to accept. While that be true, I wouldn't want to say it by myself. I have been working on Indian language computing and Indian language technologies for over 3 decades. And I have been seeing the transformation of the necessity for languages in communication on the digital medium over the years. But more importantly, it's the panelists here who have actually been connecting with people. And I would like them to say more about the importance of language and culture and the power of that in communicating about products, brands, process, or for that matter, even the philosophies. So we start with maybe Shuvadeep, yourself.
Good morning, all. Thanks for coming in the morning. I would like to start off with a very simple question. What is the basic output that we seek from any marketing intervention? The basic output that we seek from any marketing intervention is that people whom we are reaching out to, they should be able to recall our brand or service when they're planning to buy that category. Okay? And which is where all the marketing efforts try to spend millions of monies to build memory structures. Now that is where the biggest influence and importance of culture kicks in. Because if we can borrow something from culture, which is nothing but the sum total of beliefs, value systems that people live by, a group of people, right? Culture varies, especially in a country like India, culture varies possibly in a distance of 50 kilometers. The point is, when we can borrow from culture in our marketing efforts, the whole retrieval task becomes that much easier, making it that much more efficient for the marketing monies that we spend in. So if you were to look at it, the value of culture lies there. It is not about connecting. Yes, it does connect to people, but why does it connect to people so seamlessly compared to any other meaning systems that we try to create in our marketing efforts? Because these meanings are embedded in the very belief system of people and the way they have grown, the way they have lived their lives. And these cultural nuances are to be found in the rituals and symbols that we see around us. But the caution to be administered or caution to be applied is not to think that if we tap into the symbol or the ritual, we've caught the culture. A lot of times it becomes an act of symbolism, it becomes stereotypicality, which acts in a counterproductive fashion. The whole emphasis is that if we have a ritual, how do we decode it further to understand why are people doing it? When we capture that, that's when we've really captured the true essence of culture of that group of people. Now, whether it is digital, whether it is, mainline or offline, whatever we now call it these days, all marketing efforts, if it follows this simple discipline, the overall return on capital employed is far better. So it is not a romantic chase of culture. The chase of culture is actually quite hard-nosed because it helps break down a lot of barriers that a marketeer and a buyer, potential buyer, has, because they don't know each other. Unlike in a B2B scenario where there is a captive engagement, when we are talking about mass marketing or any products, any packaged good, the buyer and the seller are not known to each other. Culture becomes a shorthand to build a relationship, build a conversation.
Great. So thanks. In fact, Shuvadeep has been in the profession of creating communication creatives, and therefore, he comes with that knowledge about what really impactfully works. And so, Swetha, since you are into the kitchens of people, right? So that's exactly where all the culture actually is. Food is all that really matters. So what would you say?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you so much in first place for giving me an opportunity to talk about this fantastic topic. See, while all of us are talking about marketing and how we make the buck works for us, and that's what all of us are doing here, I would like to take a step back. And consumers are not some third person. It's all of us sitting in the same room, right? So I would say that it is love towards us and how we would want to be treated and how we would want to be spoken to. So from the space of language and culture, I think it's human for everybody to have an affinity towards the place or the space from which we hail, be it the country, language, even to a school, college, organizations that we work. So that's the bond that we have looking back. And people like to be conversed on the paradigm of from where I come from. So today, language and culture has moved from being means of communication to means of connect. That's how brands are evolving. As a marketing fraternity, I think we've evolved from, especially because this is a Deccan space that we are talking about. As a marketing fraternity, I think we've evolved from seeing this whole space as one piece. Today, I think we've evolved saying that, it's four or five different states today and people have different cultures and multiple other things. But since I come from a kitchen industry and I've been there for about almost a decade now, I think that's the place where you will see how culture is changing. The most important piece while we create content, I think digital today technically has evolved so much that you can speak to somebody local, hyper local, customized, personalized, and everything is made possible. What makes the difference is the content. And when it comes to content, I think the biggest shift that we can bring in today is that, just like he said, it's a very thin line between being culturally relatable and become stereotypical. We've seen this in movies, we've seen this in ads, and we've seen this in multiple other places as well. So when it comes to content and when it comes to language and culture, it is evolving, it has evolved, and it will keep evolving. It's not a standard piece. So we will not be in a position to connect to a same 30, 35-year-old the way they connected with me when I was 30 or 35. So culture has evolved, kitchens have evolved, people have evolved, and culture will keep evolving. Some trends which stay in here and which make a connect with the consumer for a longer term becomes a culture in some time. So I think what we have to start doing as marketeers going forward is that not just keep a trend of how fashion, style, which are mostly expressions of what you feel inside. I think it's extremely important for us to see how culture is evolving for a particular ethnography or a particular state or particular language. And that's how I think we will keep more and more in touch with the consumer more closely.
Wow, wonderful insights. In fact, somebody was telling me once that the culture is like a tree. Every year, the trees shed the leaves, while the structure of the tree or the trunk might remain the same, but the leaves are always new, right? Every year. So similarly, with time, the culture also keeps evolving, and there is a constant change. While the Indianness may be the same, but what we eventually keep becoming. But Vara, from ITC, it's a pretty legacy organization that has actually been seeing the movement of culture across the country. In fact, he was telling me that India is many countries in one. So Vara, you should have a lot of great insights.
So particularly when we look at culture has a lot of dimensions attached to it. It is a sum total of our beliefs, religion, our norms in the society, values, language, symbols, education, popular media. There are multiple. And there will be constructs. Different people have tried to give a structure to it. Some people will say that this is not part of it. Some people will say that this is part of it. But in all the definitions, one very constant thing that comes out is language. I'm just making one point because every other dimension is also important and it is dependent on how you are seeing it. So language is the one thing which evolves over a period of time. In our day-to-day things, when we are speaking, a lot of times knowingly or unknowingly, these days we are getting a lot of English words being used. Maybe 10 years back, we wouldn't have used them, and now we are using it. And now this evolution also is dependent on state to state, depending on the education that they are having, depending on the exposure that they are having. So for example, when we look at a particular message, and if I say that a technology is being used, I might express that technology in English very clearly in an ad or in a message, but that might be relatable to a particular set of audiences. But a lot of people will not understand it, or a lot of people may not relate to it, and that is where the language comes into the play. And language is the evolving factor. And along with the language, there are also symbols that are coming into the play. So one such example is saying that it is not about connecting with the consumer at a cultural level. Doesn't mean it's not a very stereotypical or a very usual way. Like if you say, if you put on the pack something written in Tamil or Telugu, that doesn't make you are culturally connecting with them. So there are some, it's a tip of an iceberg. So if you have an iceberg of culture, there are a lot of meaning systems which are visual, which are very, very visible and which is observable. Anyone can say. So Tamilians are like this. They are big fans of movies. It's such a cliche statement, as in it's fact and there is nothing wrong about it. But then what is underneath it is what is more important. So I think they thrive for heroism. So it's one part of it. And if you understand and connect them at that underneath level, that is when you will become more and more culturally relevant, rather than saying that you show some cultural symbols or cultural temples or cultural religious beliefs, or a woman or a man dressed in a certain manner. That doesn't mean that it will definitely make you relatable, but it will not generate the empathy. So you will say that I know that person, it is what they are trying to do, but then you need to relate it in a certain manner which is little beyond that. So I think the culture, the power of culture is not in understanding the superficial and the top of things that you, and let us say if you think about for a South Indian, if you talk about North Indian, the first image that comes is of a Punjabi. No, why Punjabi? Because you have always seen it in a certain manner. That is the way they are. They are very aggressive. They are very macho. They have a beard. They are very well built. You have a certain imagination. But actually, if you look at North, it is a combination or conglomeration of some at least 10 different subcultures attached to it. So I think one important aspect is to going beyond what is obvious. That is very, very important to understand the culture. The second aspect is the language is also not about, it's an evolving topic. Language is not static. That's the interesting part. Just by placing a word or knowing that, saying that I will talk it in that language doesn't help. Let us say if I give you an example of, I talk about nutrition. So nutrition has a certain meaning for a lot of people, but then you go to a certain geography and say that nutrition, they may not understand. Then you might have to say that paustic. So what is paustic? Paustic has an Hindi meaning, and then if you go to Telugu, they might articulate it very differently. So it's important to understand the meaning system beneath rather than what is superficial at the top. And that is where you will start building a lot of cultural relevance. And if it is one testimony or one judgment everyone can have is like, if it is visible to everyone, that means you haven't understood the culture yet. So you have to go beyond to understand that. And that is where language and culture and all will start playing a bigger role in making empathy and creating relatability with the brands.
Absolutely. So, in fact, when we have been trying to do this, we saw there was a huge gap for a really long time when the connect in among people in the non-physical or the physical world started moving towards digital. For most of us, we know that the internet came to our country in the year 1995, but none of the devices that you and I use were able to show our languages in text until about 5 years ago, or maybe 7 years ago. So for almost 20 years, the digital medium had no means to show our languages. And while this particular medium kept on growing, since our languages were not supported on that, there was a huge shift in how messaging to people in their language and culture kept moving. A large part of what you mentioned, that culture was kept getting wiped or maybe shaved off on this particular platform. But what we see is that in the recent times, digital as a medium has been growing rapidly, from text to video, and in video, a variety of social media and so on. So, do you think there are, any challenges, or what exactly do you think, the digital as a medium, which has been growing very rapidly, is likely to transform or is an opportunity? What would you say about that? Yeah, I want maybe. So, yeah, any of you.
So I think digital is just a medium, and as technology is a leveler for everyone. Okay, so what we have been doing, we will have to continue in the same way. Just that you need to understand the nuances of that platform. When we are talking about language, language is devoid of an age group, devoid of a geography, devoid of a culture. It's a language at the end of the day. It is not dependent on saying that whether you are talking about in television or in press or print, or you are talking about it in digital. So the language has that connect. So fundamentally, if you understand that medium properly, it does not matter because you are just accessing. Maybe today on an average in India, the time spent on mobile devices is somewhere around 6 hours to 7 hours on an average. So that means they are accessing that content. So the more relatable the content is, the more interesting it becomes. They will keep accessing that content. Now, at the end of the day, you are trying to bring in relatability and understanding for the consumer. If let us say, I will give you an example. If I launched a product, simple as saying that it's a milk. In one of the geographies, this entire milk, when it is being sold in a packaged form, you collect the milk from various farmers and various centers, and you bring it to a central location. You homogenize. What is homogenization? Basically, you just beat the milk so that it becomes very uniform, so that the fat gets distributed in a very even manner. So therefore, when you boil the milk, what happens is saying that it forms a very thin layer of malai, as opposed to when you are directly buying it from a gwala or a person who is handling the buffalo, you will get a very thick layer of milk. Now, what is the big difference between these two? The only aspect is homogenization. Now, if I say that I have an excellent homogenized milk, will people understand it? May not understand it. But then, what is the homogenization process doing? It is distributing the fat in a very even manner in the milk. Now, I can communicate that saying that, let us say, if I say that to a little educated person who understands this homogenization as a process, and I say that this is homogenized milk and you will get the fat the way it is, and it is in the milk kind of a thing. Now, I can communicate the same thing in a very simple manner for a layman saying that, doodh ki malai doodh mein. I did not say anything else because the malai was always there in the doodh. I just distributed it. So I said that it is doodh ke malai doodh mein. At the moment we started saying that, when we launched our milk in Bihar, we got a huge traction. It's a very simple thing, and they understood why there is a thin layer of milk and why there is a thick layer of milk, and that is the power of language that we are talking about. So it is irrespective of digital or non-digital mediums. The moment you are communicating it at a fundamental level, using the language that the consumers understand in a simpler manner, then the job is done. So I would see it more in that manner rather than digital disturbing, because it is giving you more avenues, more easier ways of translating, easier way of creating content. You can churn out some hundreds and hundreds of pieces of content in no time. As opposed to earlier, we used to write a script, then you used to go to a translator, then we reject the translation, then we again optimize the translation, and again you go back. So I think the process has been cut short. Technology is giving that particular thing, but again, the human intervention will play a role. But I think the language and the power of language, and if you understand it properly, you can communicate it better. For me, digital or non-digital are just incidental, but at the end of the day, you have to communicate in the very simpler manner.
So yes, of course, it's the connect. The words that are said or the way that it is said, and the doodh ki malai doodh mein is a wonderful example. But you were also mentioning about digital creating for the first time the micro influencers, right? So Shuvadeep, you have been making these kind of communications. So digital as a channel. So are there these kind of shifts that have had much greater impact, or what would you say about it?
When we talk about the fluidity of language, one of the important things that we need to learn from digital is the way the language or the construct of language itself is changing, right? Let's take a newspaper and let's take a digital publisher. There is a distinct shift in the tonality of the headline, right? Now, it's bound to happen. So digital, what it is doing is that it is democratizing a whole new set of people to have an identity. Let's face it, there has been certain rigid social structures which meant who had access to identity, who didn't have access to identity. And it is not only in India. Every country in the world has had these structures in their own ways. So the fundamental shift is that structure is collapsing. Language is undergoing a drastic evolution because every different set of people have started communicating in a different way. But what fundamentally remains is the same motivation as to why are they speaking the way they are speaking, right? I'll give you an example of a very, very famous campaign which all of us would have seen. and it's an international campaign. It's Surf Excel, right? The international campaign is dirt is good. Now, if we were to for a moment understand how language comes from deeper meanings, right? In India, and I'm talking about the Hindi baseline, it says daag achhe hai. Dirt is not equal to daag. Dirt is equal to dhool. Right? If we were to do a literal translation, dirt is not daag. Dirt is dhool. But why did we take daag? Because daag is socially entrenched. Daag is a blemish. It's a portrayal of a certain report card that the society gives you. That has more potency than dhool, because dhool is like literally like a speck of dust which I can dust off. Right? That's the true meaning of language in a cultural context. Now, what digital is doing to my mind is that it is opening up new meaning systems. We can be extremely dismissive at some level or find it frivolous to the nature of content that comes upon, say, TikTok, MX, Takatak, right? But that's a new expression that's happening. That's a new consuming class that's happening. There is a certain motivation that can be learned from those symbols that we are seeing in their expression. That's the learning. That's the learning. So digital will open up in my mind, digital will hasten and make the whole fluidity of language even faster. Because the printed world, the television world has had its own different codes of language. We see the difference between a content that appears on an OTT channel, a film, and a TV serial. There are certain codes, and these codes will remain. What will happen is that today, with the proliferation and the rate at which content is getting proliferated on digital channels, we will have many more meaning systems to deal with. And that's a reality. That's a reality. If we were to think what the other thing that, when Vara was talking about homogenization, the other way of interpretation is homogenization is literally to strip you of who you are. It starts painting everybody with the same brush stroke. Digital will stop that. One of my this is my personal view, one of my current pushback to digital is that digital has started painting everybody with the same brush stroke. No. It's a far more individual medium. It will give rise to many more dialects, if I may use the term, in the context of language. And it is for us marketeers to understand those motivations of those multiple dialects. Because digital is a largely oral medium. And the advantage of an oral medium is that it doesn't take into account your literacy. It allows you to express a lot more freely. Print didn't do that. Print has a certain grammar. If you listen to Hindi commentary versus English commentary, if you would see, has started becoming a lot more dramatic compared to what they were in the past. Henry Bluefield was the only dramatic commentator we had in the past. Today, English commentators have started becoming a lot more dramatic. It has become a lot more conversational. It is not puritanical, so to speak. Right? So my submission is that digital will spawn a lot more hidden meanings of languages which marketers must decode and talk to them. And the other thing is that digital is not all about 5 seconds. Let's stop painting that picture. Was globally performance, it's an out of context conversation. But one of the problems with digital is that it has become a shorthand to sell. It is not a shorthand to sell. Everybody is moving their performance marketing monies away to brand building because brands globally have understood unless you have a brand, performance marketing doesn't get optimized on its own. So digital is going to be the new Gurukul of languages for me.
Yeah, so the proof actually lies in eating the pudding, of course. But yes, digital has the democratic effect. The hyper local is only possible when there are actually so many people are able to create the communications right where they belong. But at the same time, this democratization in digital has also been creating the other problems of fake and deep fake and so on and so forth, which people keep taking liberty about. And so it tends to question the source of information. So those are the challenges of the digital. So Swetha, will you have a word about maybe a quick word?
Yeah, sure. See, when you just post this question of challenges and how digital can go forward. See, I think the biggest challenge in digital, or for that matter of fact, even culturally, how do I connect with my consumer? Culture also spans from this end to that end. So, for example, in kitchens, we also talk about continental cuisines, we talk about Italian recipes. At the same time, we also see people moving to cooking in mud pots, cast iron, using organic oil and multiple other things, that what our grandmothers and mothers and everybody else is doing. In digital, you have content for both, and both contents are very widely accepted and followed by consumers. Now, I think the challenge for us is to first understand where your brand is going to stand and which part of the spectrum you are going to play with. So, for example, if it is to somebody who is a 25-year-old today, and if I would want to talk something that is, like he said, what is the difference between being relevant and building an affinity for the brand? So that makes the difference in terms of your choices. So it's a wide spectrum of information that is available digitally. And the most crucial part is what stance you take as a brand in the evolving scenario. Are you going to be a brand who is going to be stable, who is going to be in a culture which has evolved and in today, right now? Or are you going to be a brand who is going to evolve along with the consumer for tomorrow, for the next 5 years? Or are you going to be a brand who's going to talk about the goodness that the culture had a few years back, and then you're going to talk about that? So that is going to make a difference. So I think from the biggest challenge is that we get carried away as marketeers, sometimes with the trends that happen in digital. So that's what digital does to us. There is a sudden trend in terms of something that is very spectacular that happens, and which is very off the mark, and then there is this temptation for you to say, for example, can all brands jump onto the bandwagon of LGBTQ? Maybe not every brand can hold up to it. Can every brand stand up to the point and say that, I appreciate what my grandmother and what my mother were doing and I would want to be a part of it? Maybe not every brand can do. Or can every brand can come back and tell that, I will talk to the teens today to what they would want to be in the next 5 years in their dreams. What is it that they would want to look about? So I think the biggest challenge that we have today with digital is the fast changing trends that we have, and as simple brand managers, the way we get carried away by it. So sometimes we also lose the affinity that you're trying to build for the brand in the whole advent of being relevant to today's what is happening in the news, and not trying to sometimes step back and say what is it that the brand can be associated with that particular trend and still be relevant to the consumer whom you're talking to. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have.
Absolutely, very well said. Yeah, the digital or the social media does have this impact of being able to create a hype or a trend, that may not really last, or it may actually not have as much substance. So yes, दूध का मलाई दूध में and दाग अच्छे हैं are great examples, but are there any real impactful examples that any of you can share? I'm just asking for a case study that we can have here. Anyone?
Yeah. So there are, I just wanted to end the previous point saying that it is not about participating in trends. That's the part of the job. It is about engaging with the consumer. So the culture and language helps you engage with the consumer better. It's as simple as that. Medium is incidental. I'm saying that if you can engage with him at a certain level, what is the conversation that is happening at that point in time? Like 2 days back when the counting was happening, there's a language. Can a brand participate that? Of course, it is political. It is a double-edged sword. A lot of brands will not do. A lot of brands will do. Maybe now T20 World Cup is happening. So there is a language. There is an engagement that is happening on the social media. How are you going to engage with the audience? So it's not about participating in a trend or not participating in a trend. It is about engaging with the consumers. Earlier, the same thing would have happened very differently because these mediums were not there. I just wanted to make that distinction. Now, I'll stick to my initial point saying that will you want to connect with the consumer at a topical level, or you want to connect with a consumer at a deeper level? So these are the two choices that you can make. Typically, it always starts with the topical, and then you have to get into the deeper level because you can't connect directly at a deeper level. So there are different ways that marketeers try. For example, when I gave the Doodh Ki Malai, it's a very simple. I am just entering Bihar. I want to communicate something in a very simpler manner. At a brand level, I have made a choice of language as the connect, and I have tried to, as ITC, try to make that choice, right? Let us say I want to talk about wheat, and Ashirvad is another is a market leader in this area. The wheat, I want to, and there are semiotics with meat, and wheat is not talked in the same way the rice is talked about. The older the rice, the better it is. The fresher the wheat, the better it is. So the meaning systems are quite different, and then rice has soft, fluffy. It has to be long. It has to be non-sticky. There are certain semiotics. Whereas with wheat, it has to be having the perfect color. The grain has to look in a certain manner. And when we interact with the consumers at in North and where it is grown, and typically these languages emerge from there, not in the parts where it is not grown. People say that it should be that golden color. It has to have that kanak. It has to sound in the right manner. So we borrowed those codes and we created, it's a golden grain. So for our select communication, the semiotic is saying that we have a small earring dabba, and then in that you are having a golden grain. The moment you give that emphasis of grain, and this is the usage of symbol. So language is one part. I gave an example in the previously. Second one is the symbol. The symbol is the golden grain, and there is a dabba, and then there is a, I'm not talking about grain full of that, but I'm saying that how precious that grain is, how well I have selected that particular thing is, and then I have selected that particular thing. Third thing is saying that I can also relate to the consumer by participating in a festival. So I will give you a very contrasting example. I will not take any popular festivals of North, South, which are done to the cliche. We were trying to build a brand and make inroads in Northeast, Assam. In Assam, so there are a lot of national players who are playing over there. And then we were not sure how to we make a connect with them because we are already a very late entrant into that market. So one such thing happened saying that Bihu is a festival, which is a New Year festival. And at that point in time, they make a special delicacy called Hasal Kumara. And it is basically a duck curry along with ashgard is being made. Okay. So now we have created and crafted a masala for that particular thing. It is very, very seasonal. It is not used every month, every day. It is not even prepared also. The moment I participated and I have started giving that meaning system at that point in time, they all felt that this brand is doing something for me and they understand my culture. They may use it, they may not use it, is a different thing. But you are trying to connect with them at that particular thing. So is it so you can also create, and it has done successfully. We have communicated it in a certain manner, and we said that you can make it in a very simpler manner. We had to develop. It took almost like 1.5 to 2 years to crack that masala which gives that particular taste. So the point is saying that language is one way of connecting. Second way of connecting is essentially semiotics, the symbols that you are using which are entrenched, which are deeper into the consumer language. The third one is festivals, religion, and all that stuff. Of course, religion is not the path you want to take, but participating in a festival that you can take that particular thing. So even when you look at in even a smaller market, and by no means I am disrespecting that, Assam is a smaller market as compared to a lot of states that you are talking about. But then even there is a nuanced approach that you can take if you are intending to connect with the consumer at a cultural level. So once you do that, the empathy and the relation and the engagement starts increasing. And that engagement is what every brand is looking for. And the mode of communication is language. The moment you are able to engage with them at that level, then your brand stands out and it has a deeper connect with the consumer. So these are the three different examples. We can talk about more examples, but I think it's not about taking one route. You have to try different routes and you have to build it over a period of time. You cannot do cultural marketing and the power of culture in the market just by taking every aspect of it. You have to try one after the other, and you need to figure it out, and then you need to make it work in the market.
Wonderful examples, in fact, that reminded me about another national brand. So I come from Odisha, and this particular brand actually created a special packaging for one district in Odisha, and then they repeated that for different districts. And in that particular packaging, they put district-specific, cultural aspects with a little bit about the culture, history, and so on. And that had the kind of impact that I had never been seen before. So wonderful examples, in fact. So if any of you would want to add anything, otherwise I have a question.
One more example which I would like to talk about is Tata Tea does this. It's a very standard CTC, and they have created blends for each markets. So there's a UP blend, there's an Orissa blend, there is a Bengal blend, there is tea is very personal, right? I mean, it is not the very high grade tea. It's not a first class. It's not a muscatel. It's a very regular tea. But what you do is that you seep very easily into their life stages and do that. We remember doing something for Airtel during the 2010 World Cup. Airtel had nothing to do with 2010 World Cup in Calcutta. But Calcutta is a divided camp during World Cup. Half of the Calcuttans are supporting Brazil, the other half is supporting Argentina, and arithmetically the balance who are left are supporting many other teams. And it's a community viewing. Nobody watches World Cup alone. It's a community viewing. So what we did was a contest which was basically to see a contest which was thrown open to the local clubs to see that how are you preparing for Airtel World. I mean, how are you preparing for World Cup was being likened to Durga Puja. Simple activation, maddening response. We had nothing to do with the World Cup. Nowhere there was any correlation. But the fact of the matter is that, and I completely agree with Vara, that it is not about doing everything, but being a little selective, do the meaningful ones. If you try to do too many things, you will fail fast. A fail fast approach is best avoided when you're doing cultural marketing. Fail fast approach can be taken for some other things, but for culture, let's spend a little bit more time. Let's get to the root of it. And the dividends have to be far more richer. I mean, one for Ashirvad, I remember when Ashirvad was launched, there was an activation exercise which aimed at teaching young housewives how to make perfect rotis. Done in the north, coming from a cultural insight that when you get married to a new household, your upbringing skills are judged, and roti making is one of them.
Yes.
Now, it's a fabulous way to ensure that you co-opt that brand. It's a life stage crisis. Men will not get it, but it's a life stage crisis. Yeah, I'm going to be judged on the basis of how well my rotis fluff up. And there is no way I cannot take this brand. But that's the meaning system that you build. It's not about doing 20 things. It's about, my mantra is do two, but do two deep.
Okay, so just making a quick check. Are there people who already have questions? Because we are running out of time, and I did have two more questions, which I'll merge and ask if audience doesn't. You do have a question. Okay. So before we come to you in that case, I'm going to make one last very quick one. So, we are already coming to see that, there is a lot of variety. And there is also a great deal of amalgamation that is happening on the innovation side, that are using which products are getting created, no matter which field, and those to be communicated to people who also are as varied in their languages and culture. So now, does that pose a significant challenge? How much of this hyperlocal that can be done? I do understand that digital does help in a lot of this hyperlocal creation. probably with the growing trends of or innovations on generative AI and LLMs helping create a lot of content, I'm quite sure. I don't see that taking up these kind of creative works at all. But are there any quick comments on these, any of these? How these challenges are met or would be met in the future?
See, I think like we just started during the beginning of the discussion, I think hyperlocal is basically more about the technology enables you to speak to your consumer in a particular place and then there are other things that can come into place in terms of psychographics and multiple other things which can help you speak to a consumer in a more customized or a personalized manner. But I think what all of us are trying to say is that while there is a geography, while there is a location, but this is an individual. So I think what we could look forward for in terms of hyper-localization is maybe hyper-personalization, maybe digital, I think will get there and will evolve there, is about what are the things that obviously AI is getting there. AI might not help you build content the way you want to build, but AI can always give you the insights that can help you build better content that is more relatable and more relevant for the consumer. So what it can tell you more is about what is the inquisitiveness of this particular individual. So it is mostly about the individual, about the personality, about the person, rather than a particular geography or a particular SEC segment that we are talking about. See, something very simple as what he said. When Ashirwad launched, they did something like, how do you, teaching the younger women to make better rotis. But would that campaign today be relevant? Today, culturally, people might not like to come up and say that my consumer will be judged upon the way she cooks and I will try to help her. No, the brand will stand the other side today. They will say, stop judging her because she is making roti in a particular fashion. That's the shift that we are talking about in terms of culture. So that evolves from the way we speak, we see things and how we interact, and as a race, we are also evolving, right? So
amazing. So basically, even technology and these communications are also helping change people's perspectives and minds. So yeah, so we'll come to the question. Okay, yeah.
Check. Good morning. This is Murali Krishnan. So my question is to Swetha. Actually, nowadays digital media is bombarding lot of misinformation over there. Especially a day ago, I came something regarding the. It is not mentioning about the product, but it is say using of non-stick tawa leads to cancer. This kind of misinformation being spread on that and a lot of information being consumed, or how you can tackle those kind of things when it is directly related to your products and all. So how you are going to how you are tackling this kind of misinformation?
see, I think it's when it comes to food especially and any appliance that is in touch with food, I think I might not say 100% what you're saying is misinformation. It also depends upon the way you deal with the product. So there are certain instructions in a way that you'll have to work along with a non-stick cookware. But I think brands have started evolving away from, because it's a consumer behavior. You will not be able to control a behavior after a certain point, right? So I think brands are evolving. So how we are dealing with it, I think that's what I told you. Digital will give you information from this end to that end. So as much as there is information that comes up with in terms of influencers, in terms of this is bad, there is also a lot of information that comes in saying this is also good. See, drinking water, some people say is fantastic. Some people say don't drink water because you have to drink water. Maybe only 1 liter is required for your body. So I think digital is only telling you more and more that there are two different distinct sides to it. But I would see digital more optimistically from this point of view, because earlier, if there is a stance And it is a very rigid stance that comes out of through a print medium or through a television medium, through a news channel or anything else. And it becomes, it more often than not becomes a one-sided kind of a communication. In digital today, if you are trying to make a purchase decision, you weigh both. I think we'll have to leave it to the consumer. End of the day, the consumer knows what they know, what they would want to know, and they make choices based on that. As a brand, I think what we could do is that give the right information to the consumer so that she can or he can make the right decision. That is what we are trying to do. And I don't think we should get into the advent of managing information that is available. It's a huge ocean. It's impossible for us to manage that information.
And one more question to all the panelists, including Sachin sir itself, Vivekanand also, because you are talking about technology in terms of localization, right? Major of the brands using technology, trying to connect with the local with their languages. But where I see, lot of gap between their translations, or usage of terms, which is not appropriate in their advertisement itself. How you look into that? How technology will solve in those kind?
Sorry, sir, there's no answer from technology. We have to learn languages better. Technology learns from what we teach technology. So it is up to us to learn the languages better. You are very correct. There are atrocious translations that happen across the country. Technology cannot fix that. We have to learn languages better.
So I come from the technology side and I agree with him. So computers are actually dumb machines. They are learning through algorithms, but algorithms process data. So if they do not know because they have been fed with wrong data, machines will never be able to reach what humans can do. So that's fine. I mean, it's for us to do what we want to do. Okay, so we have had a great session. The time is up right now. There are no more questions that I can take, but we have had 45 minutes of wonderful insights come from the esteemed panels. Thank you so much. I think all the best to everyone.